Welcome to our journey through the Psalms. Today we're looking at Psalms 3, the third Psalm. And just before we even read this Psalm, I just want to pose a question to you and say, how do you deal with fear? When you are afraid, what do you do? I remember a person who said that one of his most fearful thing, one of the things that he fears most is fear itself. That he can confront any other challenge, but when it comes to fear, he says he cannot deal with that. And the question we want to ask this morning is, what does Psalm 3, how can Psalm 3 help us in dealing with the issue of fear? Now, I'm not going to read the whole Psalm, I'm just going to read one or two verses from this Psalm, and then, of course, compare with other Psalms that address fear. Not the whole book of Psalms, it's just a few Psalms. For example, in verse 3, it says, "But you, O Lord, are shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill." You cry because you are afraid. He says in verse 5, "I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustained me." In other words, I lay down and I slept and I was afraid, but somehow the Lord sustained me. Now, verse 6 is very direct. It says, "I will not be afraid of 10,000 of people." Now, you've got to be very clear here, and you can agree with me. When a person says, "I will not be afraid of 10,000 people," he is saying, in reality, I should be afraid of 10,000 people. And now he's trying to give himself some strength and courage. He says, "I will not be afraid of 10,000 people." Now, especially when those 10,000 people, according to the context, are your enemies. They seek your life. They want to do you harm. And he says, "I will not be afraid." He doesn't even say they will not harm me. He says, "I will not be afraid." Because you see, fear is more dangerous than the harm that you are afraid of. Because fear just exaggerates the result and the pain and the consequences. And this person says, "I will not be afraid." Now, listen to verse 29. Chapter 18 also makes that same reference to fear. Chapter 18 says the following, "For by you I can run against a troop. By my God, I can leap over a wall." I can run not away from a troop. That's what the text says. I can run against a troop. There's a troop coming for me. I can turn and run against. Now, a coward would run away, but this one runs against. Now, chapter 27 also, how we deal with this fear. It says here, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? If the Lord is my light and my salvation, who can threaten me?" Which means there's a serious concept here that we need to understand, that at times when we are afraid of people or circumstances, it may be because we have not made the Lord our light and we have not made the Lord our salvation. He says that the Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I then be afraid? I will not be afraid of anyone. And he's not just saying this because he has got the strength in him to fight off his enemies or to destroy his enemies. He's saying this because he rests and he believes in the Lord. And listen to Psalms 56. On the very concept of fear, he says here, "Whenever I'm afraid." And this is very interesting because now, up to now, we have agreed that you're not supposed to be afraid because the Lord is your light, the Lord is your salvation. You have to be strong. It reminds me of the child who was walking with his father. The story is told that they were walking and it was dark at night, and this child walks to the father and his small hand in the big hand of the father. He looks at the father and he's trembling, he's afraid, and he says, "Daddy, we are not afraid. Daddy, we are not afraid." All he was trying to say is, "Daddy, I'm afraid, but we're not supposed to be afraid." And listen to chapter 56, it says in verse 3, "Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you." In other words, there are going to be moments when you feel like, here I'm afraid. Here I am really lost. I don't know what to do. I'm losing courage. At that point, the psalmist says, "Then I will trust in you. In God, I will praise his word. In God, I have put my trust." Now, I will not fear. What can flesh do to me? It continues to say that in verse 4. Now, the challenging thing is once you are afraid, you actually lose your trust and your grip on God. You can actually run away from God. You know, you can be walking with God, hand in hand with God, and then you see a lion then you run away because you're not sure whether God can take care of that lion. Then he says, you know what? Let me run away. I don't know what he's going to do, but I'm running away. But he says, when I'm afraid, instead of running away, then I will go to God and trust in him. And so fear should drive us to the hands of God. Fear should drive us to that canopy, to that panoply, to that shelter, which is God. Now, we are not even saying to you must not be afraid. We are saying whenever you fear, whenever you entertain this emotion called fear, whenever you're afraid, the bills are high, the child is sick, I'm going for an interview, I don't know what's going to happen, I've been retrenched, I've just been told that I've got 5 years to live because of the medical condition I have, I'm afraid of the future, what's going to happen to my child, I've just heard that my child has been arrested, is in prison, what am I going to do? I'm afraid. Let that fear drive you into the hands of God. Like the psalmist says, whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in you. In God, I will praise his word. In God, I have put my trust. I will not fear. And sometimes even when you are afraid, you've got to say that and say, I'm not afraid. I will not be afraid. I will not be afraid. I am not afraid. And as you say that and you trust God and remember reciting these Psalms, you'll find yourself resting in the arms of God. And you'll be able to deal with the situation in front of you. Because fear makes us irrational. Fear takes away the creativity, even when there's a solution. Because you're afraid, you don't even see it. But when fear is gone, then you can begin to see other options. May God help us. And I end with Psalms 23 says, I will fear no evil, even though I walk in the valley of shadow of darkness. And may that be your experience. Whatever you are facing today, remember, God is your light, He's your salvation, He's your strength. You have no reason to be afraid. And when you are afraid, remember, you can trust God and use fear to drive you to God. May God bless you.